Let's
to
go,
the experts.
to the expert now joining us to shed some light on Ms. Onyema's case, as well as many other Nigerian sportsmen that might have been involved in this kind of situation. Is Dr. Jimmy Oshinaike, who's a sports physician. Jimmy, good morning. It's great to have you on the show this morning.
All right, good morning, Tayo. Thanks for having me on the show.
Fantastic. It's great to have you once again. Let's just cut to the chase. You've been following the story. It was a massive news last week when it broke. The Nigerian Paralympic champion, Esther Onyema, was banned for 4 years for testing positive to norandosterone, which is basically a metabolite of nandrolone, which is anabolic in nature. And we had her on the show yesterday, doctor, and she insists that she did not intentionally use any banned substance. And we're all wondering, so how she found herself in that kind of mess. Doctor, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go on, Tayo.
All right, so I was saying Esther Onyema, she was on the show yesterday, and she insists that she did not knowingly use any prohibited substance. And we're wondering, so how could she find herself in that kind of situation? If she's insisting she's innocent.
All right, thanks. It's really quite unfortunate and very devastating for an athlete like Esther. We know that she's been in previous Olympics and Commonwealth Games, and she has won laurels for the country. Now, what that tells us is that she would have been subjected to doping tests in the past, and definitely, she hasn't tested positive all the while. So it's quite surprising that now, just I think 2019, they took a urine sample and she was found, positive. That is, quite surprising, considering an antecedent. Now, what could have happened? Now, many things could have happened. Now, it could have just been an inadvertent doping. Probably she took something. Now, I'm not saying she probably took something, but I'm just saying it could be a case of inadvertent doping. If you look at, past, similar experiences like what Esther had, what we found out is that that particular anabolic steroid is often found in stimulant. So you find athletes, make use of stimulant, but most of these stimulants are contaminated, as some of them are also deliberately contaminated. So oftentimes we find out that these stimulants would have certain, substances in them that are not on the label, and athletes, by mistake, get have the substances and they test positive. Another way in which athletes test positive for this particular anabolic steroid is if they take meat from a non-castrated pig. Now, studies have shown that a non-castrated pig, which is offal, has got a very high amount of this particular anabolic steroid. So if by chance an athlete take a non-castrated pig, she might just have he or she might just have this in his or her system. And also studies have also found out that if one is pregnant, okay, I can hear you, Tayo.
You know what? You're just gonna just pause for a moment. I mean, you said something very interesting. How athletes can actually get contaminated by eating uncastrated pig. That's quite interesting. Perhaps a lot of athletes are not even aware of that kind of situation. But we need to go on a break now. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. You're welcome back to Channel Sports this morning. We still have Dr. Jimmy Oshinaike on standby, and we're looking at anti-doping rule violations and how athletes can intentionally or unintentionally
use unintentionally return positive, not knowing what they've taken.
You're right. Anyways, Jimmy, let's come back to you. Before we went on the break, we were talking about possibility of getting contaminated from eating pig offals and the likes. And incidentally, Tyson Fury got in trouble recently, just a few years ago, for this particular banned substance as well, nandrolone, and he actually blamed eating wild boars for his positive test.
Wow, well, that's quite, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, you see, athletes must be very careful. And another way in which you can also get, these anabolic steroids in your system is if you are pregnant. So a pregnant woman, is likely to produce, these steroids in very high doses. So we call something endogenous production. So steroids can either be in your body endogenously, it means your body produces it,
naturally,
or from an exogenous, or from an exogenous sources. So for the case of Esther, things that she should begin to look at is that, was she by any way pregnant at that point in time? Was she aware that she was pregnant at that point in time? Could she have taken a supplement, or could she probably have taken a non-castrated pig? So with all these things, she can appeal if she wants to appeal. But the other challenge is that I read somewhere that she didn't get the email on time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And oftentimes, she didn't get it on time. So the anti-doping body sees these as complicity. Now, because there's something we call analytical anti-doping violation and non-analytical anti-doping violation. So the analytical ones are when your blood sample or your urine sample tests positive. Then the non-analytical one does not really have to do with the blood sample as it were. So it could be a case of, aiding and abetting, trying to tamper with a blood sample, or a prohibited association, or you are in association with somebody that has been banned by WADA, or complicity. So complicity talks about you're trying to cover up, or you're not responding to their emails, on time. So that could be seen as complicity. But either ways, I would advise that she can still appeal, and let's just stay positive. So the worst case scenario is that she might still be banned, but the ban might be reduced to probably 2 years or something. So I think it's time we should just rally around her, the Nigerian Olympic Committee, the Paralympic Committee. We should rally around that and see how we can actually, go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and present this case.
Okay, interesting. I hope that will happen. Now, our athletes, you just mentioned uncastrated pig and some other food that they may just take and not knowing the substance. How do you know the kind of food to take and the one not to? How do you, how would they know? Because it's kind of difficult right now, because you wouldn't know the food you're taking, or maybe the vitamins you're taking that may contain these steroids you talked about.
Okay, thank you. Now, it is advised that when athletes are taking supplements, they should weigh the risk and they should actually weigh the need. As a matter of fact, athletes oftentimes don't need supplements if they're taking the right meal, if they're taking a balanced diet. But for so many reasons, they might take supplements. So when you're taking a supplement, make sure that you are actually sure of the substance in it. Seek help from a doctor that is versed in the anti-doping rules, and as much as possible, just stay away from supplements, because the supplement industry is $1 million industry, and they put all these things out there, to entice athletes, and most of these, are supplements out there. Some of them are deliberately, contaminated, and some probably due to the packaging, in the course of production, they get contaminated. So it is usually advised that athletes should stay away from supplements. If they have to take supplements, they should, seek, the advice of, a medical doctor. Now, there is a particular, rule, in supplement use in sport, that if a supplement works, it's likely it is a banned substance. If a supplement, if it works, it's likely it's a banned substance. If that supplement doesn't, if that supplement is not a banned substance, it's likely it doesn't really work. So that is called, that rule if you abide by that rule, you would not really, be found wanting, of being, taking contaminated, banned substances and all that. So athletes must just be very careful and seek the right advice when necessary.
Jimmy, you've made a fantastic points, and I think it still boils down to the athletes and taking responsibility. The WADA code operates by a strict liability policy. You're solely responsible for whatever substance is found in your system, and you find out that some athletes are just reckless or negligent, and sometimes ignorance. And I mean, you can't afford to be that way as a professional sportsman when there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, sure. So as an elite athlete, you must, be very, 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 very careful. Now, the challenge we're having, in a place like Nigeria is that, most of these athletes are not even knowledgeable of, these anti-doping rule violations. Now, they are not knowledgeable. And there is what we call, an athlete anti-doping right. And one of the anti-doping rights that athletes have is that, they have right to understand, what anti-doping rule violations are. They have right to things like therapeutic use exemptions, because sometimes an athlete would have to use a banned substances for therapeutic reasons. Now, a very good example is an athlete that's got asthma. And, one of the medications, for use of asthma, which is salbutamol, is a banned substance. So the rule says that, the athletes have got the right to apply for a therapeutic use exemption. Now, some people are not aware of this, so they just go take that particular asthma drug, and, they find, that particular substance, in their blood sample, and it's positive, and, they would have to fail the wrath of the law because they never appealed for a therapeutic use exemption. Wow. Another, mistake, elite athletes do is that they don't understand the substances that are banned in and out of competition, and substances that are actually banned in competition, and substances that are actually prohibited in certain sports. So these are three categories. So, for example, steroids are prohibited both in and out of sport. So it means that even if you are not, competing in an organized sport, you could be asked to present your blood sample. And if steroids are found, in your blood sample, your urine sample, you would, be adjudged, of breaking, an anti-doping rule violation. Now, that is steroid. Then there are some substances that are actually only prohibited in competition. It means out of competition, you can use them. A very good examples are things like cannabis, recreational drugs like cannabis. Now, so out of sports, you can't use cannabis, but within 12 hours in which that particular sport, will start, you are not allowed to use cannabis. So some athletes don't understand this. Then there's this last category of substances that are actually, peculiar, to certain sports. So sports like shooting, archery. Now, you can't use, medications like what we call beta blockers, because these drugs have been found to enhance concentration. So, in such sports, you need, maximum concentration when shooting. So if you're an athlete and you go use, a beta blocker, you would be found, liable for anti-doping rule violations. So we must understand these various categories. Okay. Otherwise, athletes will still keep falling, into issues like this.
Okay, interesting. Now, you just mentioned that some of these athletes don't even know. Now, how can you educate them? What's the job of the NOC in this situation, the different sports federations, and even I don't know if I think we need to find out if we really have the WADA rules domesticated right here in Nigeria. What is the job of these federations to actually, ensure that these athletes don't fall prey regularly?
All right, thank you. Now, the WADA rules are actually domesticated. So there is a particular handout that the National, the Nigerian Olympic Committee, actually had, and they distributed to athletes. I'm privy of that. I don't just know the extent in which that was distributed. So every sporting organization, the basketball organization, the football organization, volleyball organization, must have, personnel that would, on a regular basis, update athletes on these anti-doping rule violations. Because these doping rule violations, oftentimes they change yearly. So you must, always educate athletes. Now, the the Nigerian Olympic Committee, has got a lot of work to do. The National Anti-Doping Committee has got a lot of work to do in this regard. And I know that they are trying, as a matter of fact, they're trying to actually rebrand, the Anti-Doping Committee so that athletes can have more knowledge. Another thing athletes can do is that there are materials online. So there is a particular material online which is, accredited by WADA. It's called Global Draw. So that Global Draw is a website in which if you're not, certain about any medication or any substances, you can just type it there, and it tells you if this medication is prohibited in sport, out of sport, or in a particular sport. So there are materials online. But the challenge we have in Nigeria is that most of our athletes, probably are not even smartphone savvy. They might not even have access, to these materials online for many reasons. So we need to do a whole lot of education, Now, I can boldly say that most of our athletes on the grassroots, don't even have an understanding of these particular anti-doping rule violations. And the challenge we're having is that, we don't do, anti-doping tests regularly. I'm not sure if even in the NPFL, players, have subjected, to this test.
Doping
so
control,
you find that, doping control, I'm not sure. Now, in a place like the United Kingdom, after every game, certain players are tested.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, certain players, are also registered into the whereabouts, list. So it means that they can come to your house anytime and ask you to present, your blood or your urine samples. Now, if these things are there, it keeps athletes on their toes so that they won't, fall prey of this. By and large, we've got a whole lot of to do in Nigeria. Athlete personnel, which includes doctors, which includes parents, which includes coaches. So we still have a lot of work to do in that regard.
Jimmy, Real Ferdinand, I remember, got banned for not showing up for a test all those years ago. Jimmy, before we just go, let's get your part in short on this already. You've mentioned how everything is being done by the authorities to make athletes aware of the dangers of using, PEDs and stuff like that. So I'll just ask you, as a part in short, do you see intentional doping as being real, or is just an excuse for athletes to cheat?
Now, intentional doping is real. Now, there are two groups of dopers.
Unintentional.
Sorry, unintentional. Yeah, unintentional doping is possible. And we've seen cases of unintentional doping. And we can't deny the facts. Now, a case of Richard Gasquet was a good example. Went to a nightclub, kissed a lady that had cannabis and all that. And that was how, he had got cocaine. So there's a case of even a guy called Alberto Contendor, that had to eat, that actually ate a contaminated meat and all that. So there are cases like this. But it's also important to say that we have sophisticated dopers and dopey dopers. So sophisticated dopers don't get caught. A good example is Lance Armstrong. Somehow they found a way to actually evade it. As a matter of fact, Lance Armstrong never tested positive. It was, a case of whistleblower. People said, he had been doing this, and it was even after he retired that he had to come out straight. Yeah. Marion Jones, for a long time, also, just had a way to evade these things. But there are dopey dopers, that are always somehow caught. But there is a place of, unintentional doping. But strict liability rule, is always there. So athletes have to be very careful.
No excuses, indeed.
No excuses.
Dr. Jimmy Oshinaki, thank you very much for shedding some light on how athletes can fall foul of the anti-doping rule violations. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.